Hi, this is Craig Stocks here for Utah Desert Remote Observatories. You can find us online at utahdesertremote.com. And today I want to talk about this image of M78. This is the brightest reflection nebula in the night sky, and it has some unique processing opportunities. I think that it'll make this video a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more involved than most of them that I've done. But there's a couple of good opportunities to demonstrate different techniques here. For one thing, it's so bright in the core that we'll have to use kind of a pseudo HDR technique to blend a darker processed version of the core with a brighter version of the rest of it. And also, this is just fundamentally an LRGB plus HA image. So we've got those two things of interest going on. So I'll be processing it first in PixInsight and then in Photoshop. Don't know right now if I'll break this into two videos or if I'll just forge ahead. I may just forge ahead, and of course if you want to skip ahead, you certainly can. So with that, let's jump into PixInsight. So we'll start in PixInsight, and I think for this one I'll just kind of walk through the whole process. So I'm going to start, of course the first thing I did was go through all of my subs and throw out any of the ones that weren't up to snuff. And after that then I'll go to the WBPP, the weighted batch preprocessor. And I tend to get in a hurry. I shot this image one night, or this target one night, and liked what I got, but I wanted some more data, so I went back for a second night, but I had already processed the first night. So, we'll see that there are some things that we'll do differently for the second night. So first I'm going to just reset WBPP, and I always keep my settings from the last session, but clear all file lists. And first let's go to the lights, and I'll click the plus lights. And if we go to the, this was shot on the Dream Astrograph, which is the system we have available for monthly rental. So if you're interested in a very nice system to rent for a month or longer, be sure to reach out to us. So here are the 2 nights of data. So we'll open the 13th first, and I can just click on one, Control A to select all. That'd be Command A on a Mac. There's the first night. Now I'll just do the same thing with the second night, which is the 14th. Control A, open. And now I need to load flats, darks, and bias frames. And my shortcut for doing that is I'll load an entire directory of calibration frames. So if I click on the plus directory, PixInsight is able to go through a whole directory and all of the folders within it, and pick out appropriate files and put them in the appropriate spot. And so within my Astro folder, I have a calibration folder, and within the calibration folder I have this DreamScope combined. And if we just take a peek in there, you can see that it has flats, darks, biases all lined up. So I just click on that folder, select folder, and PixInsight will go through and load all of those calibration files for me. So just to validate, there's the bias, there's the darks, there's the flats, there's our lights. We'll go to the calibration tab. I don't have a 600-second dark, so I'll optimize a master dark for that. And I generally set a pedestal of 300 and just apply that to all light frames. And then of course I'll choose the appropriate output folder, and since we've already run this before, I've already got a folder for M78 DreamScope, so I'll select that. Now, registration and reference image, and I mentioned that I had already run this data the night before. Sometimes when I do that, I'll have stars or some piece of it that I know I want to continue to reuse. So for instance, I might get enough RGB data the first night but then I want to add more narrowband. So I want to keep the same registration that I did the first time I processed it. So to do that, first we have to change the registration mode here to manual. Now I have to find the appropriate calibration or calibrated frame to use as the reference. To find that, I'm going to just quickly pop into Windows Explorer and go to my D drive where I have my PixInsight swap files, and we'll go, of course, to the M78. And if we go to the logs, you'll see there's a couple logs here from the times it has run before. I'll choose the latest one and just double click on that, and that will open it in Notepad. And now I can do a Control F, and if I just search for best reference, that will take me to where it selected the best reference frame, and what it selected was from the linear defect folder, and it selected the luminance frame number 191. So what I want to do for my reference frame here is navigate to that folder. So we're looking for, on the D drive, we're looking for the swap files, M78, LDD, it'll be in the luminosity folder, and 191 right there. So this is the frame I want to use as the reference because that's the same one I used last time. And just click open. And now this run is going to have files that are aligned with the last run if I want to do some mixing and matching between the two. So with that, I would just click run. And I have already run this, so I'm not going to take the time to run it now. We'll just magically, through the magic of video, jump ahead and look at the results. So once this is finished running, what I usually do is just double click here in the field of the PixInsight to open a file. And what we want to do is go to our swap files to the M78 Dream Scope. And now I want to go to the master folder. And I almost always keep my folders in descending date sequence with the newest first. So here's the newest red, luminance, green, blue, and HA. I typically will just start with the red, green, and blue. Click open, and that'll open those three red, green, and blue files. And I usually don't even look at them. I just immediately jump to my icons I've saved over on the right, working from top to bottom. And the first thing, since this is RGB, will be channel combination. And I can just grab the red, drop it into the red, grab the green, drop it into the green, grab the blue, drop it into the blue, click the circle, and voila, now we have an RGB image. Now with the new version of Blur Exterminator, there's some new processes. I don't know if this is the right way or the wrong way. I know Russ talks about using Blur Exterminator earlier in the process. I haven't fully got my mind around that yet, so I'm, for the most part, doing it the same way I always have. So the first thing I'll do is do a quick dynamic background extraction, but I know I've got some stuff down here that's not background, and we're on a star here, so I'm just going to move some of my pre-programmed samples, and I want to just click on and delete these samples that are in this HA region. And maybe we'll add one here. And now I'll just click the check mark, go ahead, and that will do a quick dynamic background extraction. And of course it already looks a lot better. So we can close this. And let's update the screen stretch just to see what we're working with. Oh, another interesting item. I've got some, I'm not sure if it's a light leak, but it only shows up in the green channel. So we're going to have this little artifact to deal with too as we move along. So now I will run Blur Exterminator, and I'm just going to run it as I normally do. I've played around with running it once for just correct, and then again to sharpen the nebula, and for my purposes I haven't noticed that much difference, so I'm just running it once. Russ would probably tell me that's the wrong way to do it. Now that I've done that, I am going to run spectrophotometric color calibration. And again, I've got 3 versions saved, one for my one-shot color camera, one for the monochrome ASI 6200, and one for the FLI 16803. So we'll grab that one and just drag it over onto the image, and that will run my spectrophotometric color calibration. And at the end of this, I'll have a pretty well processed but still linear data. So looks like SPCC is just, now it's done. So here's where I mentioned that we've got this really bright core, and we want to optimize one image for the core and one image for the background. And I'm going to do that by right-clicking and selecting Duplicate Image. And now I'm going to do 2 different stretches. One, I'm going to focus on just the bright spot, so it'll be a darker version, and then the second one will be a little bit lighter, ignoring whether or not the bright spot gets blown out, but trying to pull out as much of the background nebulosity. So I do this the real easy way because I'm going to do all my final stretching in Photoshop anyway. So I'll do the screen transfer function and the histogram transformation tool to be able to apply it. And let's start with just a simple screen stretch. And remember, this first time I want to focus on having good detail in the bright part of the nebula. So I'm going to darken it down so that the center looks good, but I want the outer edges to be kind of the same brightness they will be in the bright one, so they blend well together. So I'm actually going to brighten the background somewhat and keep the center dark. I don't want it to be. I'm just doing this by eye, and I'm going to say something like that. I'll just drag the triangle down to the histogram transformation tool, apply it. So now this one is stretched. Now on this one will be stretched focusing on the stuff other than the center. So let me zoom in here a little bit. I can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out of the sliders. And I'm going to make the darks, basically I'm going to enhance the contrast. So make the darks a little darker, brighten the whites a little bit, and try to find kind of a happy medium where we get good detail throughout. This is really just kind of a gorgeous area. So I'm going to apply that. And now I'll turn off the screen stretch. Now the last thing I want to do is apply Star Exterminator and Noise Exterminator to these images. These are both stretched nonlinear images now. And if you've seen me before, one of the shortcuts I do, I'll right-click here on the background and select Image Container. And note, this isn't an image container, this is a tool to make image containers. So I'll click on the icon to add views, and these are the only 2 views we have so far, so I'll add those. Now when I take the triangle and drag it out onto the background, now we actually have an image container. So I can just drag my Noise Exterminator and Star Exterminator process icon that runs both processes, drag it onto the image container. So that's going to run Noise Exterminator and Star Exterminator each on both of those files, the one that's dark and the one that's not dark, the normal one. And I'll just pause the video here for a minute while that runs. Okay, so that finished. Here are the 2 star images, and the one that was cloned is the darker one. And just to keep things straight in my mind, when I do a clone, I usually make the cloned image the one that's kind of special, which is usually darker. And then here's the the base image. Here's the main image, and then here is the darker image with more detail in the core. So now I'll just save all 4 of these, and just quickly go to File, Save As, and I'm going to save these as 16-bit TIFF files. And since they're already stretched, 16 bits is plenty. So save as 16-bit. Oh, that was actually the darker one, so I need to, well, normally I would have added the word dark. I'll just remember that the clone is the dark one. Here's the brighter one. Save as. And again, we'll go to the same folder, save it as a TIFF, 16-bit. So those 2 are saved. Now we'll just go ahead and save both versions of the stars. If you like small stars, which I'm a fan of small stars, you'll find that the darker one produces much smaller stars. So save that as a 16-bit. And lastly, this is the dark stars. So I'll try to remember to add the word dark to the title. And say this is a 16-bit. Now, all of that is just to get the RGB background and the stars. So we still have 2 other files to deal with. We have the HA and the luminance. So let's go ahead and look at those. So here's our HA. Throw a quick stretch on that. I don't think I want to run dynamic background extraction on this because it has a fairly full field, and I don't see what I would consider a real gradient here. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this as it is. So we'll just run Blur Exterminator on it, and it'll be ready then to stretch. And luminosity, we'll look at it. We may need to run dynamic background extraction to smooth it out a little bit. I think that would benefit from some dynamic background extraction. So I'll open this up, and again, this is one I've saved with sample points around the perimeter. There are some I don't want to include. So just like we did before, we'll remove these. They're a little hard to see. And we'll just move this one out of the way. So let's go with that. And update the screen stretch. That looks good. Now again, because we have the really bright core, we're going to want to make 2 copies. First, I want to run Blur Exterminator. So we'll run Blur Exterminator on this, and that will clean up the stars a little bit. But eventually all we're going to have from each of these is just a starless version. So sharpening the stars in this case, it happens automatically, but it's not really a goal we're after. So now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a duplicate image, and the duplicate, the clone, is going to be the darker one. So we're going to especially darken down the brights. Let's zoom in so we can see what's happening here. Want to get a lot of detail in that core area. So let's say that's going to be our dark version. And then this will be our bright or base version, where we want more contrast. And because of this dark nebula tends to go black real fast, so I have to be a little bit careful that I don't get it too dark, or we'll lose some of the little fine detail that's going on in there. So let's do that. And then lastly, we'll stretch the HA. And because this is right along the edge of Bernard's loop, that's what we're picking up here, is just a lot of that area of very thick, rich HA. So it gets real red, real bright in that corner. So we'll apply that. So last I want to go back to my image container, but not this one because that's the old one. So we'll delete that. Open our image container tool again, and let's reset it. And let's add these three files. I just double clicked on those to check those. So now we have the three files that we just worked on in an image container. And now I'm going to run my version of Noise Exterminator and Star Exterminator that does not create a separate stars image, because all we need are the starless versions of this. So I'll pause this again while it runs and be back in about 45 seconds. Okay, this is done processing. There's our HA, and here's our two luminance layers. So we'll just real quickly save these. So we'll go to Save As. And again, we'll navigate back to the Astro folder where I have the DreamScope M78 data, and we'll save this as a TIFF. 16-bit. Okay, and then I'll just minimize it so I know that I've already saved that one. This is the bright one. Yes, this is the bright one. So save as, and we'll again go to Astro DreamScope M78. If you're not familiar with the DreamScope, it's an amazing fast Newtonian. This one has a 16-inch primary mirror, currently outfitted with an FLI 16803. We're in the process of changing that to an ASI 6200 camera, but it's just a beautiful system. And lastly, this is our dark version. Save as. Save it M78. And I'm going to add the word dark. (16-bit). Okay. So at this point, unless I've missed something, we are done in PixInsight, and we'll pop over to Photoshop. So the first thing we're going to do, and if you've watched any of my videos, you've seen this many times. First thing I'll do is go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, and that brings up this dialog box where we can browse for the files that we want to load. And obviously we want to load the ones we just created. So we'll navigate to that D folder, D drive, to the DreamScope M78. And here are the files that we just created. Click OK. OK again. So what Photoshop is doing now is loading these individual files as layers in a single document. So we'll have one document with a layer for each one of those files, and conveniently Photoshop uses the file name then as the layer name. so it works out real nice. You can keep track of things. Once these all get loaded, we'll do a little housekeeping first to drop things into appropriate folders or groups, as they're called in Photoshop, layers. So it's a layer group. And then we'll start doing our processing, retouching, fixing up that green spot, blending the lights and the darks, adding the HA, and so forth. And probably the first thing I'm going to do, to me this looks upside down. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is rotate the image 180 degrees so that it's facing up, which is the same way the sample was that we looked at the beginning. So as soon as it's done loading, so I'm going to image rotation 180 degrees. So here's our dark version of the core, and where's our, it's right below it. So there's the bright version, here's the dark version. I'm just going to select both of those and put those into a layer group. And I use the keyboard shortcut Control G, that would be Command G on a Mac, and that just drops the selected layers into a group. And then I can double click and change the name to Luminance. And we'll just turn this off for now and get things organized. Here's our HA data, so Control G, HA, and I know I'm going to want a levels adjustment layer in pretty much every one of these groups. So I will just go to my shortcut here to add a levels adjustment layer. Now, it can be a little confusing, so let me undo it and talk a little bit about this. My currently selected layer is the name or the group level of a layer group, and the group is currently open. In other words, the little disclosure triangle here is open. That would be closed. This is open. When I'm on a layer group title or name, if I add an adjustment layer, it will add it inside the layer group. Now, if this layer group is closed, if I add an adjustment layer, it will add it above the currently selected layer, which in this case was that layer group. So the normal behavior when you add an adjustment layer, it adds it on top of the current selection. But if that current selection is a layer group and the group is open, it will add it inside the layer group. So just little confusing behavior in Photoshop. Here's the dark version of the stars. Here's the bright version of the stars. So we'll just drop those into a group. Name it stars. We're going to have this in screen transfer blending mode, and we'll just go ahead and drag it up to the top of the layer stack and turn it off for now. Here we have the base RGB, and there's the dark RGB. So I'm going to drop these into a group, name it RGB, and we'll add a levels adjustment layer. Now I want to switch the order of these. I want the dark one on top, which is the clone. So I'm just going to click and drag it up. And all we want from this one is these dark areas where we have detail in the core. And if I turn that off, you can see that it's pretty well blown out in the base layer. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a layer mask. And I want this layer mask to start out hiding everything on this layer. So that would be a layer mask completely filled with black. An easy way to do that, if I hold the alternate key when I add a layer mask using the shortcut at the bottom, it will add a black layer mask. And you can also go to layer, layer mask, hide all, or reveal all. Now that we have our layer mask, and this is important, you'll notice there's a double outline around the mask. I want to make sure that I've selected the mask and not the layer. And the reason is I'm going to use the brush tool and paint on the mask to bring back some of the detail. And the way masks work in Photoshop, black on a mask is hidden. In other words, every place this mask is black, you don't see anything from this layer. If I grab my brush tool over here and set it to white, and right now it's at 100% opacity, and let's just make the brush an appropriate size, and let me just paint with white, and I'm just going to, you can see every place I painted a squiggle on here, but every place I painted with white, we can see through this layer to see what's below. Now we don't want it just squiggly all over like that, so let me undo that, and let's paint a little more purposefully just in this area where we want to make it darker. And I'm going to reduce the opacity to 50%, and I can go straight to 50% by typing just a 5 on the keyboard. We'll select 50%, 3 would be 30%, 2, 20%, 0, 100%. Now I can paint a little bit at a time and bring in this detail. If it goes too far, I can just tap the X key to switch to black and undo. And I'm even going to go to 10% and just paint in little bits here. Something like that. Now we have to deal with this. Now, this is just in the green layer. There's a couple different ways I could deal with it. One would be to go to the, and it's actually on this bottom layer because this, you can see if we turn this layer on and off, it's only affecting these bright areas. The crude way of doing it would be to grab something like the remove tool and just paint over it and let the remove tool do its thing. That works, and if there's no detail going on there, then that's probably okay. Let's undo that. You can see the effect. There's really not much detail here, and it's not going to be hidden by stars, so we do have to be a little bit careful. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this smaller, and I'm going to add a blank layer, and now I'm going to change, I've got this set to sample all layers, and I'm going to be a little bit more selective in where I apply the remove tool. And what I'm really trying to do is just get rid of the big things. Now we've got just kind of a dull green glow. Now I'm going to add another blank layer, and I'm doing this just to be non-destructive, and every place I use the remove tool, you can see I can turn that on and off if I made a mistake. And frequently I won't find the mistake until a day later after I have saved the file, so maintaining all of your layers like this for a non-destructive workflow is very helpful. Now I want to do just some selective darkening to darken this, but I only want to darken it in the green channel. So I'm going to do two things. We've just added a blank layer, and I guess I should probably label these, so I'll label this heal reflection, and here we're going to kind of burn or darken the reflection. First, I'm going to set this layer to soft light blending mode. And in soft light blending mode, painting with a dark color darkens it, painting with a light color lightens it. Medium gray has no effect. The other thing I want to do is I'll double click on the layer out to the right of the layer name, and I'm going to only use the green layer. So now any place I paint with black, and I'll start at 10% opacity with a smaller brush, and what I'm going to do is just paint in this area where there's green, and what I'm doing is painting away the green but not affecting the underlying detail or the red or blue data. So you could think of this as color correction, you could think of this as retouching. And you can be as careful and precise as you feel the need to be. If you go too far, just again switch to white and go back over it. So this is, I'm going to say this is a little bit of an advanced technique, and sometimes 10% is too much, so I'll reduce the opacity to 5 or 2%, something like that. And now we've gotten rid of that green reflection. And let's zoom out. We turn these two layers off. Now you see it. Now you don't. And we didn't actually change any of the detail. We just darkened that green reflection. And then let's turn the dark layer back on. So that's what our RGB layer looks like, and that's going to be our color. Let's look at our luminance layer next. So I'll just close the RGB. Here's our luminance, and if you recall, we have both a dark and a light, just like we did on the RGB. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to add a layer mask, and then paint with white to bring detail in where it was blown out. Something like that. And now let's add some global contrast. So I can darken the darks. I'm worried about this dark nebula down here because it's already starting to go black. So let's just darken overall. And we might even need to brighten the blacks a little bit. And I'll say something like that. There's the data. So now to make this an LRGB image, this is our luminance data. This is our color data. If I come to the group level for luminance and I change the blending mode from luminosity, from pass-through to luminosity, now we have these layers are setting the luminosity. This layer is setting the color on the bottom. So if I turn the color layer off, we just have that black and white. So there's an LRGB image, and we'll just drag the luminosity group down right on top of the RGB. So now we want to add the HA. So again, let's turn the HA layer on, and I'm sure we'll wind up darkening this some. I don't know that it needs anything in advance. So let's just go ahead and convert this into a plus HA. And to do that, I'm going to double click again to go into the blending options. And in this case, we want to add just red. And then we'll change the blending mode to either lighten or screen. And generally, screen will work better for you, other than it's going to make it too bright. So we'll have to use the levels and darken it down a little bit. And this is where you just adjust to taste. What do you want it to look like? Now, I feel like the red gets a little too strong in here. So I'm actually going to, you can do one of two things. We can mask this out by adding a mask to the layer group and then painting with black at something like 50% opacity and put less of the hydrogen in there, or we could use a burn and dodge and darken it. But I'd say that works pretty well. So let's just jump ahead. Let's add some global adjustments, and the ones I normally use are levels, color balance, hue saturation, and the last one I put on top will be a solid color, which you have to get from the little yin-yang symbol here at the bottom. And this will be hex 131313, which is the little number sign here in this field means hex values. These are hexadecimal. and that translates to an RGB values of 19. And then I'll put this in lighten blending mode, and what that does is sets kind of a floor level so nothing in this image will be darker than that. So now I can go to this global adjustments and darken my darks, maybe brighten my brights a little bit. I feel like I want to darken this luminance layer a little bit. To do that, I'm going to add another levels adjustment, but I'm going to use what's called a clipping mask. And so when I add a levels adjustment layer within the properties panel, the icon shows you, this is the shortcut to clip this adjustment to the layer below it. And when I click on that, you see it insets, and there's a little arrow pointing down indicating that this adjustment layer is clipped to the layer right below it, so it only affects that layer. And so let's darken it just a little bit. Don't want to go too far because it is supposed to be bright. It's supposed to be brighter than the stuff around it, but still dark. And so we may just need to darken everything a little bit overall. Problem is, like, this area is getting a little too dark. So what I'll do is I'll use my brush tool with black, and let's go 10%. And what I'm going to do is paint black on this layer mask that goes with this adjustment layer, and that will reduce the effect of this levels adjustment layer in this area and bring back some of that brightness that we were losing. So you can play with global color balance. And again, this, you would adjust this to taste, to whatever you like it to look like. And you may even want to play with the global saturation. And last we'll come to the stars. When we turn these stars back on, these are already in screen blending mode. And let's see which, these are this is the dark version of the stars. That's the bright version of the stars. I like a mix of the two. I like the dark version, except I like the bright stars for the big ones. So I'm going to probably really aggravate some people. I'm going to add a layer mask to these dark stars, and with black as my foreground color at 100% opacity and flow, I'll make the brush about the size of those stars, and we'll just bring out some of the bright stars. Something like that. So you may like that, you may not like that, but I'm not telling you necessarily what you should do. I'm showing you ways you can do it, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Probably need a little bit of red in the dark areas. We can do that with the color balance tool by selecting the shadows and then add some red into the shadows. And we might even want to add some blue in the highlights. So it becomes just a very iterative process now as you work back and forth, experimenting with different things. We might want to change the tone of the red by going to hue saturation, target the reds, and then you can use the hue slider to change the tone of the reds. So this has been a fairly long tutorial. I think I'll stop here and leave the rest of it up to you to decide what you want to do. So just to recap, we did WBPP in PixInsight using a reference frame from the previous night so that we could mix and match from data we processed earlier. We processed both a dark version and a base version of both the luminosity and the RGB. And then in Photoshop, we blended the dark spots of the bright nebula. in order for it to blend in. Added the HA in screen blending mode, and added the stars also in screen blending mode, and we did a little mix and match between the bright stars and the less bright stars. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll try to answer them as best I can. I hope you found the tutorials like this useful. I do enjoy producing them, even though I tend to get busy and not have time. So I hope you found this helpful. I apologize again for the length, but if you got to this point, congratulations. So I hope you have a great day today and an even better night tonight under a clear, dark sky. Thanks.